So today's guest I'm super excited about is Brant Hansen. Met him. I didn't really meet him, but I heard him speak on the cruise we did, Family Life, Love Like You Mean It cruise, and immediately downloaded his book, started it, and ordered 3 copies to be delivered from Amazon before I got home. And the message is really good. The book is called The Men We Need. And I think it's really pivotal right now. It's around Father's Day that we are doing this podcast. So, Brant, you start the book kind of talking about being keepers of the garden.
Yeah.
Can we kind of start there? I feel like that's kind of like the foundation,
Totally.
right?
It is. And so this is really needed. I felt like guys don't really know what we're aiming at. I mean, even like in church culture stuff, they'll be like, well, we need to be men of God, stand up and be men. But we're not like saying, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, unless you have some sort of an idea. It's interesting too. I'll bring this up because I just read this yesterday. Do you know who Andrew Tate is?
Andrew Tate. No, I don't.
Okay, that's probably just as well, but he literally is, at times, has been the most Googled person on earth.
Okay.
And he is huge on social media. He is a Muslim convert. He was a kickboxing guy, professional. And he is all about women having children all over the place, fast cars, just being rich and being an alpha and blah, blah, blah.
But, yeah, I don't know who he is, but
yeah, he has 14 billion views on social media.
Wow.
Of his videos and stuff. So the point of this is like a lot of young guys, especially, but men in general, they're like looking for something. And I was reading an article about him yesterday. This is in a London newspaper. And the reporter wasn't buying into his alpha stuff, but said, there's a temptation simply to ridicule this, but you can't deny the extent to which it connects. Talking about Andrew Tate's message, which is awful. There are, bluntly, a lot of young men out there who do not know what to be. What Tate does is answer that question. And you might not like his answer, but at least he has one. I'm like, exactly. Like, so what is the actual thing? What's the masculine thing? What's great about masculinity? It's actually life-giving to people. Like, what are we actually made for? Yeah. So that's what I was taking a shot at in this book. Instead of just deconstructing, don't do this, don't do that. Like, what is it? And I think the sweet spot for us is the job that Adam was given in the garden.
Yeah.
Which is keeper of the garden. This is specifically was given to Adam in Genesis. And I think that's it. I think that's the thing to shoot for, because it winds up being wonderful for everybody around us too.
Yeah. And you make a point in the book, when Eve took the fruit, Adam was right there by her side. He wasn't, as we're often perceive as younger. I mean, you talk about it. You had this idea when you were a kid that he was away somewhere, but he wasn't. He was right there.
Doing nothing.
Doing nothing.
Right.
Doing nothing.
Doing absolutely nothing. So that's the thing. Like, I always did think that Adam was a mile away working or doing something, but he wasn't. He was right there with her, just being completely passive. And he's supposed to protect this woman and this place from intruders. And here is a liar who's come into the garden, and he's just letting him lie and fooling Eve and him. Yeah. And so he failed as keeper of the garden, and destruction results. Like, so I try to flesh that out too for guys too. It's like when I'm talking about being a keeper of the garden, this is a wild place that he's making order out of, that Adam is charged with doing. And both he and Eve are given dominion over everything. This isn't about men being superior over women at all. But this is about a specific role that we're equipped for. And it's not just physical defense, but it's also like, if you're creating a space where species can flourish that couldn't out in the wilderness, like you're letting like vulnerable people in your life get to flourish because you're there.
Yes.
Like, you are a bringer of security into people's lives, not insecurity.
Yes.
So people who are vulnerable get to thrive because of you. I think that's really awesome and a great way to understand what's truly masculine and what isn't. Because when you do understand that this is the rubric for talking about masculinity, you can look at a guy like a Hugh Hefner back in the day or Andrew Tate now and
Mm-hmm.
go, actually, there's some of the least masculine people on the planet.
Yeah.
They don't protect people, they exploit them, the
Yeah.
vulnerable. Like, so once we get this through our heads, like a lot of our decisions can be made based on this, and it winds up being again awesome news for the people around us.
Yeah. And I know that you have, how is this book different from your book to young men? Is it very much?
Oh, not much. So I followed up this book, The Young Men We Need, is what it's
Mm-hmm.
called. So it's the men we need and then the young men we need. All I did was shorten the chapters.
Okay.
I took out some of the chapters that I thought wouldn't be as relevant to
Okay.
somebody who might be 15 or 19 or 14, but it's still the same concept.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to give them a picture of what it means to be a keeper of the garden, and then why. I'm making this very clear in both versions. Like women are very attracted to this.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
When,
for sure.
yeah, when we're bringers of security and not insecurity. So we're not preying on women. We're not making them feel insecure by being sarcastic or put downs or leering or whatever it is. But it's like when we actually make them feel more secure because we're around, that's golden. So I do make that point in the young men we need too, just to get their attention. Like this
Yeah.
may point you to something that's deeply true about us.
You have a line in your book. You say something like, our idea of masculinity, big muscles, good looks, these different things that we think we need to have to be a man. You make a point in the book that those can actually become a threat
Yeah,
to our
yeah,
loved one
yeah,
if we are not keepers of the garden, if our eyes stray, and if our
yeah,
actions say something different, then actually those attributes that we call manly actually become a threat to her, right?
yeah. So this can work against you. And there's a flip
Mm-hmm.
side, really good news to this about why you don't have to have all that stuff. Like if you do, great. If you're in
Yeah.
great shape, you're really handsome, and you've got a gigantic truck, and you've got great tats and stuff. That's awesome. However, that's not the fruit. That's not the stuff of masculinity, really.
Yeah.
It's trapping. So a young girl, say in high school, will look at the quarterback on the football team or a linebacker and say, "Well, he's big and strong. He's athletic. He's smart. Wow, that's attractive." She's picking up on cues that would say he could defend her if he needed to.
Mm-hmm.
He could be a good provider. But those are really baseline cues, and they can be very foolish. So then they marry that guy. Maybe they're 25, and he
Yeah.
is all about his body and building his body and flirting with other women.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so now she'll resent his muscles because he's not bringing security, he's bringing insecurity. Like she may resent you. Maybe you're a great hunter and fisherman, and at first, it's like that's really cool, but now that's all you're about, and you actually don't care about her, or you
Mm-hmm.
put her down. Well, now she doesn't like that at all. She's not attracted to that.
Yeah.
It's a threat. Conversely, and this is the best part, if you're not all that stuff, but you still are actively making people around you secure because you're there, the vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
and people in your home and your sphere of influence, that's your garden.
Yeah.
Like you your wife may be very attracted to you whether you are jacked or not because of who you are.
I remember I can tell myself a little bit here. I can be the kind of guy that likes to get the reaction, and and with that, my driving with my wife, I
Huh.
would just say drives her nuts, or
Huh.
drives her crazy, I should say. But I remember years ago, she rode with my brother-in-law, and she said, I felt so safe with him.
Hmm.
And to your point, we think manliness is maybe going fast or whatever, but it's not. It's making her feel secure in the
Yep.
car
Yep.
so that she feels safe. And I mean, she never said she was attracted to Kenny or anything, but
Yeah.
I remember it very vividly, like, oh man, like here I'm trying to get these selfish reactions all the time, but what she really wants is to feel safe and secure.
Totally. And so much of that, it can be driving. That's a great example, but so much of this is driven by words.
Mm.
Words are huge. We do not respect just how big this is in any relationship. I mean, words are obviously huge to God. Jesus is the word. Like God spoke words and the universe came into existence. Like, but like just even the slightest little put down of my wife makes her feel insecure. And I could use my words to build her up. Or lack of words, lack of building up, like that can be a major cause of insecurity. And so I tell this story, and I mentioned this on the cruise when I was talking too, but it's in the book. I was quoting another book, but a guy was writing about how he used to pat himself on the back because he'd be like, well, if somebody invaded my house, I would get out my shotgun and no one's going to mess with my wife. I'm not going to put up with any intruders in my home hurting and then he realized, wait a second, that actually doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
He said, what happens more often is I'm the intruder.
Yeah, he's the intruder.
With my words, like my lack of love, my lack of demonstrative support for my wife, my lack of building up the people who are around me. I'm the threat. And that really hit me hard because even at my age, I'm in my 50s, but even at my age, I'm like, you know what? I got to do better with my tone of voice. That's always been an issue. My wife's always like I sound too lawyerly or I don't sound compassionate enough. And instead of just dismissing that, like, well, wait a second, my role is for her to feel really secure. So it helped me rethink that.
Well, you're so witty too, so I'm sure that you could get yourself in trouble in a hurry, huh?
Yeah, so that's just it. Like maybe you do have a barbed sense of humor, and I'm telling you what, this whole model of thinking through the keeper of the garden thing has really helped me because you're able now to realize how I should behave. It helps you sort through a lot of this stuff. Like, well, why is this bad? Like, why? Oh, because it brings insecurity into this garden instead of security. Or even like child discipline. Like we know that if you don't discipline consistently and lovingly, children feel more insecure. Well, so I need to be.
Yeah, they like to know their boundaries.
Yeah, and it's not out of anger. It's just out of I know like how to be your dad. Well, now I'm being a good keeper of the garden because you're bringing security in by being actively involved instead of passively like Adam.
Yeah. You talk a lot. I don't know if you use these words, but you talk about a lot, really about living with purpose and not just maybe drifting through life, whether it's porn or video games or, whatever else.
Yeah.
How do we capture that with young men or old men or men in general? How do we help them live with more purpose?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that don't get talked about very often. A few things. Number one, it's not going to be out of guilting people. Like you should stop it. Well, look, most people don't want to be addicted to pornography. They don't want that. Their will isn't strong enough though. And your will, big picture, your will is always going to fail you. I mean, you can ratchet up your will like 10 times and the 11th time, it's like, oh, I'm back in shame again. And so what we really need to do is become different kinds of people so that we just are different and things start to get crowded out of our lives. And so what I really encourage guys to do is to actually talk to God more and not let these habits or these evil things we let into our lives, not let them stop us from continuing to grow with him. Because we'll slink away in shame, like I'm such a loser, or and then we stop talking to him, and then we feel meaningless, and then we're trying to find meaning somewhere else, and but he still wants to partner with us. He still wants to partner with you as a sinner. You can talk to him about this. The important thing is you continue to be honest with him and humble with him. But he still wants to partner with you in life. So even with Adam's case, like he totally blew it. He's ashamed, right? He and Eve are ashamed. What does God do? He says, Adam, where are you?
Mm.
And it's a lament. It's like, why aren't you showing up to walk with me anymore? I mean, he knows technically where he is, but it's really a lament. And then they're ashamed, so God clothes them both. He makes clothes for them. And those clothes, if you look at the Hebrew, are actually royal priestly garments.
Mm-hmm.
So he covers them with something, I guess it's beautiful. And the third thing he does is he goes with them outside the garden. He doesn't kick them out and then abandon them. He clothes them. They're ashamed of themselves. He puts beautiful clothes on them and then keeps going with them.
Yeah.
So think about that as a sinner who gets into this stuff. I have compassion on us because no human beings have been subjected to what we're subjected to technologically and with pornography and super normal stimulation and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody. It's not supposed to be like this. So we could just tell people, hey, stop it. But another practical thing is a lot of this stuff just comes down to schedule, I've realized. So it's a matter of don't put it have the intention to restructure your days in a certain way so you're around people more, you're more involved with stuff, you've got more momentum in other areas. That alone will take a huge dent out of this problem. Huge.
I really liked your story too of your the young men
Oh yeah.
on the mission trip.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing. Like their environment changed
Yeah.
and their schedule changed. And as a result, their struggle with lust was absent.
And so this was on a trip too. There were cute girls in the high school group. We took them all to build a house in the desert in Mexico or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a week of really hard work. It's really hot, but they're working together. And we had, worship time in the evening and talking and laughing and a lot of goofing off, a lot of hard work, a lot of togetherness. And at the end of the week, I wasn't even thinking about it that much myself, but I was like, hey, has lust been a big thing for you guys this week? And they laughed. They're like, oh my gosh, we haven't even thought about it. We didn't have media. We didn't have anything and we're together all the time. Like they didn't just become automatically better moral people.
Mm-hmm.
It's like their schedule changed and they were filled with purpose and like they had momentum going and like this. Our culture is so isolated, and then we've got this technology that goes everywhere. And it's like this is really hard. And I think rather than just saying stop it, which we should, don't get me wrong, all of us, it's evil and it exploits people.
Mm-hmm.
But understand, okay, we're up against it here. How do we become different kinds of people? And we can do that by continuing to pursue God and talking with Him daily. Continuing to partner with Him in life. And I make this a point because I want anybody who's listening to this to know this. All prayer is you and God talking about what you are doing together in life.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. You can lay it out there. Your hopes, dreams, concerns. If you're like, my brain always drifts off when I'm praying to something else. Okay, fine. Take whatever it is that you drifted off to, fold that back into your prayer because apparently that's something that matters a lot.
Yeah.
You're distracted by something. You can bring that into your prayer. Just keep pursuing it. What happens is you wind up growing up and your desires start to change.
Yeah. Going back to prayer, growing up, my dad, he would always take as when we had landlines.
Yeah.
He would take the phone off the cord. And that's how we would pray at night a lot of times.
Huh.
And it made it a conversation. It was, hey God, here's how my day went,
That's kind of genius.
And it was, because it totally changed it from this ask, conversation to just because naturally when you got the phone to your ear, it naturally changed us to try to have that conversation. So I think it's really good what you said. Like, man, just keep talking, even if it's that rabbit trail, or even if it's how you struggle, have the conversation. Talk about it.
So this is, again, you become a different sort of person. So that things become second nature to you that weren't before.
Mm-hmm.
You begin to react differently. I liken it to practicing free throws.
Okay.
So why do you practice 10,000 free throws or whatever during the course of the season? So that when there's 2 seconds left and the game's on the line and there's this huge crowd, you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
It's second nature because you've practiced it. So whereas pre all that practice, you wouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah.
But now
for
you're
sure.
a different kind of person because you've been doing this thing over time. And I'm telling you, like memorizing scripture, actually talking to God, that's the kind of stuff that it changes you so that you react differently to things. Your desires change. And even in the moment, you won't get as angry about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You're pretty unflappable. You're pretty cool about things because you're a different kind of person now because you've been doing this other stuff. So, yeah.
How about video games? I feel like that's a big one.
They're awesome. And that's kind of the problem. That's kind of the problem. They're too awesome, literally. And I say that again, it's not, I love video games. It's not an indictment. Some are actually horrible, but most of them are pretty benign. The problem is they're so good, they're so fun, they're so good to play that they can give you dopamine hits that real life can't quite deliver.
Yeah.
That's the problem. So you don't
It's
level
the fake.
up. Yeah, it's fake. You didn't do anything, but you got the dopamine hits like you did. Like you really leveled up at something. If you get a job stocking shelves at 16 years old, you're not going to level up every couple hours. You know?
Not at all.
Right. So the games, if that becomes your way of life, it's going to steal life from you.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to feel ennui or malaise or any number of French things. Like you're going to feel meaninglessness, and it's because you're doing meaningless things. But in the moment, it feels like it's something, but it's not.
And I think that part of the problem too is that meaninglessness drags us back down to more meaningless, right?
Absolutely.
It often compounds on itself.
Yeah. And so same thing with pornography. Because it's meaningless, it gives you the dopamine hit or whatever, but because it's meaningless, you wind up being surly and just kind of without energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring that up because I do mention this in the book. Like there's researchers, there's a guy on YouTube doing a TED talk about it. It's very interesting when he talks about, especially teenage guys get diagnosed with stuff that actually goes away when they break their porn habit.
Mm-hmm.
They're diagnosed with something like, oh, he's got this, he's got that. Well, the problem really was a spiritual one.
Mm-hmm.
And being addicted to something that delivers all this fake dopamine, and then real life can't deal with it. So you're extra surly and your attention span isn't as good. You're not as confident as you should be. The good news about that is that all can change.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's really a wonderful change that can happen in our personalities. Dallas Willard talks about our personalities being renovated. And I love that image. Like that's what God wants to do is renovate our inside out. But that's gonna again come from trusting him, spending time with him. I am big on memorizing scripture. I'm not the best at it, but I think that's the most punk rock thing you can do because nobody can take it from you. And you can rehearse it no matter where you are. You can remind yourself of what's true in a world of constant lies. Like I just think it's a huge, plus Jesus had it all memorized. And I think that's a good example.
Yeah. It's something that takes hard work too. And
it does.
Time,
it gets easier. Did I show you guys that app I use on the cruise?
No, what app do you use?
I should get a cut from this, but I don't. It's the Bible Memory app. It's what it's called.
Bible Memory app.
It gives you points. And it's an easy interface for memorizing scripture. And there's actually a big scoreboard. So
I'm all about scoreboards.
Right. So I'm like ranked number 12,100, but I could see I just leaped over Edna and Genevieve.
Oh, wow.
So
the Bible Memory app.
And that's really helped me. It's a silly thing, but it's just points. I can't even redeem them for Dave and Buster's prizes or anything. That's but it works. And having that stuff at your fingertips where you could just be walking your dog or doing whatever and going back over what you know to be true. That changes you.
Mm-hmm.
because you're putting your mind, you're paying attention to what's true. And your
Yeah.
attention, that's another thing I say in the book, your attention is everything.
Mm.
What you pay attention to determines who you're becoming. So highly recommend that.
That app kind of reminds me of I do a lot of running, and I have
Yeah.
this Garmin watch, and I love it because it tracks everything,
Yeah.
and I can seriously, you go after these stupid badges that
Yeah.
really mean nothing, but
Right. But it works.
but it's like, oh, I'm gonna get that badge, and that
Yeah.
means I'm gonna go walk 3 miles this weekend with my wife, and it's a good thing. Like, and Brant, I've done that. Like, I'm like, hey Ginger, like, there's this badge this weekend. It's a 3 mile walk. You want to go for a walk? And so I mean, it's like good because she's all for that, but it's a stupid app, but it makes it good.
It totally works. It's awesome. So I remember being a kid, we had vacation Bible school because I grew up in churches and stuff. And they would give us, they'd have teams of the kids divided up, and each day we get points for memorizing scripture. And there were cars up on the wall, and they'd move the car according to the points that we got, so we could see these cars racing. Man, that worked. And then as a young adult, I'm like, well, that's stupid. I don't need to do scripture memorization. Now I'm like, I'm totally back to that.
Yeah. Well, we use it with that reward. We use it when we potty train our kids.
True.
Here's a piece of candy, or put a star in the chart. So
yeah, I just want that star on that chart. And what a great application for it, though, to be able to go, okay, so this is helping me actually put my mind on things that will help me with anxiety. Like things that will teach me how to live better. To remind me, how about start with Psalm 23:1, a Psalm of David. But all it says is, the Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I lack nothing. I have what I need because he's my shepherd. For today, I may be nervous about something. Nope. I don't lack anything because of who he is. I have everything I need.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you talk about speaking truth to anxiety, but you just got to memorize it, and it's not hard. It's only 6 verses for the whole chapter, and each verse is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
That's so good. So I love how they use our natural tendencies of rewards to get us.
Well, you know what? Like
it's good.
There's rewards in scripture. Jesus talks about it all the time. Like, you will be rewarded for certain things. So, like, I guess we are kind of reward oriented and some not.
Well, and that to the point about video games. I mean, that's a lot of it with video games, and the dopamine hit is, you got to the next level, you got X amount of points, you're whatever. I mean, that's what it is.
You know what, too? You think about video games, a lot of them are actually just simulated work.
Yep.
And it's
we're going to get that way more and more, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, but it's like, even like back to Farmville or whatever, like, or Angry Birds. Even. Just use some really basic social media examples, but it's like, you're trying to solve this problem and execute a solution to the problem, and then try to solve like, this is all, we're made to work. Work is good, but like, that's fake work.
Yeah.
And meantime, we're made to be productive and actually add value to things. And we're not adding value when we do it virtually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When we load a minivan full of luggage, it's like playing Tetris.
It totally is. 100%. Even like first person shooters and stuff, like trying to rid this level of this, and then I'll go to the next level and solve that problem using these tools. Like, it's still like we have this desire to accomplish something.
Yeah.
I think the way evil works, like it's right out of like the demonic playbook, is to take what we have that's good and make it worthless.
Yep.
And I think this is a good example of it. So that's why, even though the content may not be so bad, we can see why it's so addictive for so many people. And instead of having real purpose in life, that's what's sad about it. And I'm not saying never play video games. I never said that.
Well, to your point in the book, you talk at least what hit me was, yes, you're playing this video game, but whose life are you missing out on right now because
Right.
you're stuck doing this? Where are you missing real life at
Yeah.
because you're replacing it with the fake?
So that's a big deal for our culture. Don't think about it, because a lot of people be like, "Well, who am I hurting?"
Mm-hmm.
There are guys. There's a phenomenon in Japan, but it's now there's names for it in the U.S. and France and everything. It's just young guys that check out of life,
Yeah.
and they just hole up. Somehow they support themselves, or their parents support them, and they just do porn and video games,
Mm-hmm.
and they never do anything outside of that. And it's like, well, if I'm not hurting anybody, well, A, you are. Obviously, pornography, it depends on all sorts of exploitation. But even if it's just video games,
Yeah.
like, dude, you are hurting people. You were made for something. We needed you out here.
Yeah.
We needed you. We needed you to become a man, like to become a keeper of the garden so that evil doesn't take over. And also, maybe there's a woman that would have appreciated a mature guy that she could have married and had a family with, just
Mm-hmm.
as an idea. Or like, or, people in your neighborhood that need you to be around. We need you
Yeah.
creating things and making things. God gave you specific gifts. So the idea that as long I'm not hurting anybody is like, no, you are. You are, because we needed you to be who you could be.
Yeah. To live with purpose. That's good. Um, you have a chapter heading or title. Um, Choose today who you will be tomorrow. Something like that.
Yeah.
You know, how relevant is that? Because there's a book I read recently called Be Your Future Self Now.
Huh.
And it's kind of the same idea. Like, there's a future us
Yeah.
that we can, think about and try to align ourselves to, but we need to be, that means if we work backwards, that means we're living with intention today.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's what we often miss out on. We just take today, right? And we don't, we sift through life, we scroll through social, whatever.
True.
But if we think, you know what, God has this in mind for me, husband, father, whatever, that means there's steps today I got to be taken.
Yeah. The big part of that to me is so underrated, and that is just what you're paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
That will determine who you're becoming.
Yeah.
Nobody sets out. I make this point. Like, you can look at older guys that are angry, shriveled up old guy. Like, nobody said, I want to be an angry old man. But it happened. And that's a trajectory that happened. And it's not random. And there's some guys who are older, and you're like, man, that guy is a blessing to everybody. He can listen. Yeah. He's not needy. He's not narcissistic. He's not on an ego trip. He's just a blessing. And we're like, how did that happen? That wasn't random either.
Mm-hmm.
These guys paid attention to some message, some narrative, some stuff, some media, some messages. That determines everything. That determines who you're becoming. God is very interested in who you're becoming. It's his primary interest.
Yeah.
But it's based on attention. And you do pay attention. It's like you're paying to attend a game. You're paying to, and you can only pay to attend one thing at a time. So it shapes who you are. Here's the thing. If you're younger, you have to watch this really closely, like your attitudes, how you react to things, your heart attitude, because it'll only get more and more caricaturized as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
So you may be 24 acting a certain way, but you're starting to veer this way. That's how you wind up being a caricature of yourself. But the same thing can happen for good. You're
Correct.
watching what you pay attention to. You're becoming more patient with people. You're growing in love and gentleness, and you're a keeper of the garden. Man, it just gets more and more.
You're getting badges for memorizing verses on an app.
Yeah. It's your ultimate reward is snagging some of those badges.
Have you read the book? Napoleon Hill wrote it, called Outwitting the Devil.
I have not.
Disclaimer: theology is terrible in the book.
Okay.
But it's his book. It was published after he died. Like, his family members didn't want him to publish it. But it's a book, and it's a conversation with Satan, and he's interviewing Satan and asking Satan, what would you do in this circumstance to get people? And what would you do in this circumstance? But overarching, I mean, it's it really aligns with this overarching. Satan, the devil, just keeps coming back to, oh, I'm just going to get him to drift, you know.
Huh.
Yeah, in Sunday school, yeah, I'm just going to get him to talk about this kind of stuff and not really go deep. And in the public school system, this is what I'm going to do. But it's always about living complacently and living without purpose and intentionality, and just, just kind of
Yep.
taking it as it comes.
I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I talked to this magician guy, and he was talking about misdirection. And I feel like that is like a primary tool that the enemy uses.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, this is important. This is important. This is important. Too late. Bam.
Hmm.
It wasn't. It wasn't. And now you missed it. Like you missed what could have been so great. And
Yeah.
it's too late. People are so filled with regrets. And it's because of misdirection, I think. Our whole culture misdirects us on what actually makes us happy.
Mm-hmm.
It's over, and we know this. There's a book that just came out called The Good Life by two Harvard researchers. They've done this longitudinal study they're part of since the 30s, like of people's lives, and they know what makes people happy and what doesn't. And they know it's relationships.
Yeah.
They know warm, close relationships, bam. Okay. Achievement, career, status, fame, good looks doesn't work. But our culture still does that. Why? Like it keeps doing it, and it doesn't, and we still keep going for it, but it's misdirection. And at the end, you're like, oh, why did I think that was? So I think that's a big part of it.
Is the misdirection. So at what point does midlife crisis play into that? Where men kind of sit back and evaluate and say, you know what, I've been living my life, but I need to realign it. Does that come to that?
I haven't thought about that. I think everybody's I think everybody's changing all the time, whether they realize it or not. That's actually one of the conclusions from this longitudinal study.
Okay.
They picked some guys that were at Harvard, like in the 30s, and some high schoolers from the tough end of town. Young guys, charted them and their families over all these decades, and they're still doing it. Some guys 95 years old or whatever, and their families on down, and they have found that people think of adulthood being kind of static. It's not. You're still changing. And another thing said, which I found really interesting, they said it's really strange, but humans seem to have a real hard time, even if their lives aren't really working, rethinking and starting with something else instead. And there's a word for that Jesus uses, like in the Greek, it's repent. And it literally means rethinking, like this isn't working. So I think everybody's changing. We're all kind of doubling down on what we trust in. I don't know about the midlife crisis thing, because I think that has to do too with like just where you are with your relationship with God, and how much wisdom you have, whether you've asked God for wisdom or not.
Yeah.
So if you haven't, then you're always going to be casting around trying to figure out what's going to make you happy, and it's not going to work.
Well, I was just thinking, because you used the word, what'd you say? It was, he missed the musician, the
magician, the misdirection.
The misdirection. And that just made me think of midlife crisis. Like some guys are like, man, I've been going the wrong way. I need to reprioritize. So
yeah, well, I guess that can be a good thing if you're repenting. But as far as like, wait a second, this isn't working, I'm going to go after this other thing, it's not going to work. But then you wind up on your deathbed
with regret.
You had that opportunity. I read an oncologist yesterday. He gave us a commencement speech last week at Columbia, I think. Can't remember. But he it was at University of Pennsylvania. It doesn't matter. But like it really matters, Brant. But he was talking about there's 4 things that people say on their deathbeds very commonly. And it broke into basically 2 different sets of 2. What was it? It was, I want you to know that I love you. Because I haven't made that clear. And another was, please tell me you love me. The other 2, what was it? Oh, it was, will you forgive me? And And the other one, the last one was, he says these four things come up all the time. The last one was, I want you to know that I forgive you.
So
Isn't
it's
it?
love and forgiveness.
Yeah. It's like, do you love me? I love it. Things that haven't been said. But when it all comes down to, like,
That's all
it's
that
not like,
matters.
oh, hey, make sure you sell the house for X amount. It's not, it's not about my career. Wow, I had a good career, or wow, I had a bad career. Like, it's down to this need for reconciliation
Mm-hmm.
and to know and be known. Well, that can start now. You don't have to wait till your deathbed. It's an idea.
Yeah. It's so good. Maybe you don't ever address this, but I kind of want to get your take on it.
Sure.
Well, I think I know your take on it, but yesterday I was, my wife and I are part of a pro-life clinic here, and I was talking to the director, and she said, our marketing has always been to women and trying to make them more resilient, more aware of their choices and their baby.
Mm-hmm.
She said, but I've been thinking about it, and I think we need to go after the men now. And I said, man, I think you're right. Like, I just read this book, and it's all about men stepping up. In regards to abortion, what part, Brant, do you think men play into that if they were keepers of the garden? I mean, obviously, there's all kinds of things here because your pants would stay on, first of all.
Right. Right.
But do we need to?
Well, okay.
Does Linda need to be directing that more toward men and men being men? And
she's right on the whole, I think. I don't know about her role in that. And here's what I mean. I think our whole culture should stigmatize creating children you don't take responsibility for.
Yeah.
I mean, that should just, of all the things, we have stigmas on things all the time, and we do it to get less of it, right? You can subsidize something to get more of it, but you can stigmatize it and people will stop doing it. And there's a lot of things we stigmatize that are great. Like, I'm a fan of English Premier League football. Like, they stigmatize anybody who says something that could be possibly racist from the crowd. I mean, that person gets arrested or whatever, but everybody they'll boo them. Like, they don't want to have anything to do with it. No room for racism, it says everywhere. Well, that's good to stigmatize that. So stigmatizing having children, like guys not taking responsibility for their kids, should be a huge stigma. Like, you are not a man. That is the unmanliest thing you can do. And then we get a lot less of it. For some reason, I think it's evil that we don't stigmatize that. I'm not talking about hating people, I'm talking about stigmatizing behaviors that victimize people. So I think that needs to be in the cultural stew, loud and clear. And then that becomes more natural. You're right about the genesis of it too, because again, if you understand that we're supposed to be keepers of the garden, like, and that's the cultural expectation for a man. That's what makes a man a man. Well, then you don't have sex with somebody who's not your wife, because you're using her. You're not protecting her. Like, if you were going to protect her, you would commit with your with your spirit, like you are with your body.
Correct.
But you're not. It's all about you. So you're not being a keeper of the garden. So I think having that understanding would really help a lot. I know where she's coming from. I don't know if in her position that can happen.
I don't know that it can, but it was like a light bulb moment, because she's been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah.
And she has these phone conversations with these young women, and that's what she said. I realized over the weekend. She said I had several calls from teenage boys, and I realized that maybe we need to be directing this to young men, because a lot of times she says she'll hear from the ladies in the group that, well, I'm doing this because my boyfriend or whatever doesn't want this. So,
yeah, right.
But I was thinking about it in regards to this podcast coming. Like, man, we really need, the men. This is the kind of men we need to step up, and
so if we could have
and
this
how many problems would get fixed.
Yes, right. I talk about that. I think it wasn't in that book. I can't remember. I think it was. We talked about if we actually just obeyed God
Oh,
in
yeah.
that one area of sexuality. It sounds crazy, right? Like it's so out of step. The biblical idea of sex is only between a man and a woman and in a marriage. Well, okay, but do the thought experiment. Like, what if we did that?
It'd
There
be
wouldn't,
huge.
there wouldn't be a
Domino
need.
effect.
There wouldn't be a need for a Me Too movement.
Hmm.
There wouldn't be incest. There wouldn't be sexual abuse of kids. There wouldn't be human trafficking. Would be no more. There wouldn't be tens, hundreds of millions of STDs, some of which kill
Hmm.
people. Um, there wouldn't be the mass exploitation of women and children in pornography.
Hmm.
I mean, just down the line, like what would that look like? I don't think God's stupid. Actually, I think we're stupid. Um,
Agreed.
yeah, and we're like, that's so bad. We know better. Like, yeah, we've created all of this, and we have to live with it. But I do think the idea of having a cultural expectation of masculinity that's modeled along the lines of what I'm talking about, it doesn't have to be my book, but along those
Hmm.
lines, would be a huge, huge win for everyone in our culture. Everybody.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I mean, on stage, I mean, I was like, I got to get this book into my friend's hands
Yeah.
and my son's hands and my son-in-law's hands. Like, this is what we need.
Right.
Um,
And they can do it. That's the thing. You can't. They don't have to be. It's not about being outdoorsy guy. You can be if you want, but
mhm.
this is for any guy.
Yeah.
You can use whatever you have. I'm a words guy. I'm not good at outdoorsy stuff, but I can use my words to protect the innocent,
Hmm.
and I do. Like so, that's very fulfilling.
Well, and we can. I mean, that's, I guess, would be another thing I would say is, are you the exception to this manly man that God's called us to be, or is this something anyone can do?
Anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Every single guy can do this, and there's something deep within us, I think, that resonates with it too. Once we
Hmm.
understand it, we're like, there you go. That's what I'm supposed to do. It's good.
Well, and that's why, to your point, you know, the two stories I remember, the brother and sister from Wyoming, the boy
Yeah,
steps up,
yeah,
and then the other one, I think it's in a different country where he's scaling the wall to
yeah,
get the kid.
yeah. Like
We
the
all we
yeah,
all understand that as the most authentic view of masculinity.
yes.
Like we get it in our
We all
core. Like,
resonate with it. We
yeah, there's no doubt. So I
and
agree. Like we know.
and there'll be people that are like, well, women could do that stuff too, and they can't. It's just that we're made for it.
Hmm.
Like we're especially attuned for this purpose.
Yeah.
And it's like having a certain kind of car that can tow another one. Like there's some cars that can still tow, but it's like that's not they're made for something else. Like they can still do it, but like this just resonates with us because it's like, yes, I get it. I can do that.
I like your towing illustration. One time I towed my buddy with a little Nissan little like S10. And it was I got it done, but it was not right. His is a
Right,
bigger car and
right.
yeah, like
You can do it, but
we did it, but it was
yeah,
not good.
right. That's great.
Um Brant, what's the most influential book?
I've
Maybe
got
it's
a
the Bible. I mean, maybe
yeah.
it's the Bible and
Well, besides the Bible, like um, I'd say recently I would have to. I mean, I want to say Tolkien or C.S. Lewis or Chesterton or something, and they've been really influential for me. But Dallas Willard, a book called The Divine Conspiracy, and another book called The Great Omission, kind of a piece, but
okay.
same thing with Renovation of the Heart that he wrote. But it's all about actually following Jesus.
Mm,
I ask people, when did the disciples become Christians? And it's a really hard question to answer. And the reason it's a hard question to answer is because it doesn't make any sense. And the reason it doesn't make any sense is that Jesus didn't called them to become Christians. He called them to follow him.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually what he's still looking for, is followers. So we need to follow, which means listen to what he says and put it in action.
Mm-hmm.
How do we bless our enemies? How do we love those who are against us? How do we love our neighbors as ourselves? How do we practice generosity? How do we, like, all of that stuff? We learn how to do it. That's what those books are about. Like, actually putting it into practice. That's what we're supposed to be, actually. They're Jesus' apprentices. So those have been really helpful in me understanding that that's actually what God's looking for.
Well, I'm going to check them out.
Cool.
If you recommend them, they got to be good.
Thanks.
Hey, message to the world. What is Brant Hansen want the world to know, if he's got one message to share?
Okay, I got a message that's percolating on my head right now. That is, following Jesus is actually easier than not following him.
Mm.
And he said so effectively. When he said, "Come to me and I'll give you rest. My burden is light. My yoke is easy." He literally is giving us a way to live that's actually easier. And here's what I mean by that. 'Cause you'll be like, it can't possibly be, but it is. Forgiving people is hard, for instance. But what's harder is living a life of unforgiveness and bitterness.
Mm-hmm.
That's way harder. Trusting God, that can be a challenge. You know what's harder? Living a life of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Everything he tells us actually makes life better. It's for us. Everything, like being grateful, can be hard sometimes. You know what's worse? Being resentful and bitter, and again anxious because you're not great. Like, gratitude chases out anger and anxiety. His entire way of living is better.
Mm-hmm.
And he said so. So I would like the whole world to know that. Like, he's not just the guy who died on the cross for our sins, God incarnate. He is that. But he's also given us a way to live that changes everything and makes it better. And I highly encourage people trying it. Try it. Go ahead and try and follow him and then see what happens.
That's so good.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Brant. I really appreciate you doing this, and
sure, my pleasure.
Your book, and I hope that together we can help make some more men out of the world.
Yeah.